In Magic the Gathering, stack interaction is the ability for players to affect spells on the stack before they resolve, and I am of the opinion that more stack interaction tools need to be given to colors outside of blue within the Commander format. My name is Nathan, you are watching the Salty Productions YouTube channel. This started out as a single hot take for a separate hot take video, and I decided to blow this up into its own video. So if you like this video, leave a like on it and subscribe to stay tuned for more Magic content. There are three primary reasons why stack interaction should be printed outside of blue in Commander. Number one, at the highest level of Magic, stack interaction is the most important form of defense. Number two, diversity in gameplay leads to more interesting games and a greater overall sense of fun playing Magic. Number three, color pie restrictions can still be obeyed by printing stack interaction outside of blue as measured by contemporary standards. Now, if you believe these three things, then we can conclude that limited stack interaction is a design space that should be explored and printed for colors outside of blue. To emphasize and be clear about what I'm arguing for in this video, I do think that blue should retain the most powerful forms of stack interaction, and I believe that other colors should be able to interact with the stack at a higher mana cost or with reduced utility than what blue currently has. Let's dive into each argument. Number one. Stack interaction is the most important form of removal in high-power games. So substantially all win cons have to be introduced to the game via the stack, and there's an implicit trade-off baked into the rate that you pay for counterspells, where the slot that you're dedicating to defense is cheaper than a targeted removal spell in general, because stack interaction has both a timing restriction built into it and it can remove non-permanent cards such as instants and sorceries. It is this ability to interact with the broadest array of ways that your opponents can deploy a win con that makes Counterspell so powerful, because it's the most reliable way to prevent your opponents from winning the game, provided that you cast it at the right time. If you examine the most popular ways to resolve win cons in higher power Commander, you need counterspells to prevent yourself from losing the game. Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation, casting Reanimate on a Protean Hulk with an instant speed sack outlet on the field, Devoted Druid with a haste enabler and Vizier of Remedies or some other combo piece, a Lightning Bolt, Reset, Reiterate, 3-card combo, etc. would all win the game if you were instead holding a Swords to Plowshares or Assassin's Trophy or even a Submerge instead of a counterspell. Additionally, only stack interaction can protect against powerful sweepers like Toxic Deluge, Vanquish the Horde, or Blasphemous Act. Thus, we can conclude that stack interaction is the most effective strategy for stopping win cons at higher power levels than targeted removal, which I don't think is a particularly hot take. Number two, diversity in gameplay leads to more interesting games and a greater overall sense of fun playing Magic. For some reason, Wizards has declared that stack interaction is the domain of blue within the color pie because blue stands for knowledge, learning, and the pursuit of omniscience. When you look at playable counterspells, and I use the term playable loosely here when we step outside of blue, which we can define as being between 0 and 2 mana, blue has between 30 to 40 playable options, white has about 5, black has about 3, red has about 5, and green has about 3. And of course, colorless, we can't leave out, has about 3 as well. By my estimation, blue has about 6 times as many counterspell options as the next highest colors, white and red. Furthermore, if we take a look at the cEDH meta, I pulled the last 6 months of cEDH decks that made the top 8 from mtgtop8.com and performed a manual calculation from their cEDH metagame breakdown section. We see that 78% of top 8 cEDH decks contain blue. Put another way, only 22% of top 8 cEDH decks do not run blue. This means that 78% of cEDH decks are going to be running the same set of 5 to 10 best-in-class blue counterspells, which, in my opinion, leads to stale gameplay. Now, why is this a problem? Well, homogeny of the format means you see the same few cards over and over again, which means more repeated patterns of gameplay and less uniqueness of games. This could lead to less interesting games, perhaps less fun games, because of lower overall variability in experience. And I think a wide and diverse meta makes for more interesting gameplay overall. If all higher power Commander decks are forced to splash blue to remain competitive, this narrows the meta by restricting the viability of commanders that do not contain blue in their color identity. Number 3, color pie restrictions can still be obeyed by printing stack interaction outside of blue that is worse than the tools that blue currently has, and there are two underlying arguments as to why this is true. First, the strictness of the color pie has already been infringed upon by Wizards' own card designs in recent years. Let's take a look at the kinds of cards that Wizards deems acceptable to print that break the color pie. Within the black color identity, black is traditionally known for being able to efficiently remove creatures and planeswalkers, but struggles to remove artifacts and enchantments. Both Feed the Swarm and Withering Torment give black access to enchantment removal at a moderate rate. Previously, black was only able to remove enchantments through edict effects such as Debt to the Kami and Farika's Libation, which were not only below rate but also could whiff if your opponent has multiple enchantments. Additionally, Gate to Phyrexia gives black the ability to remove artifacts. Within white, we have Reprieve, Avid Interrupter, Dawn Charm, and Lapse of Certainty allow white to interact with the stack at a moderate rate, with the downside being that the stack interaction is temporary. Within green, green is traditionally known to struggle with creature removal but can effectively remove artifacts and enchantments, and we've seen Beast Within, Kenrith's Transformation, Lignify, and Song of the Dryads all be effective and popular in the Commander format within green. So additionally, Harmonize is unconditional draw in green, which is typically reserved for blue. Red is traditionally known to be able to destroy artifacts and deal with creatures via direct damage, but struggles to remove enchantments. Of course, we have the ultra-popular Chaos Warp, which can hit any permanent at the risk of giving your opponent something better. Additionally, Tybalt's Trickery and Mage's Contest are all generic counterspells, which are typically reserved for blue. And then within blue, traditionally blue struggles to permanently remove permanents from the battlefield and often must resort to bounce effects and counterspells to keep threats off the battlefield. Pongify, Rapid Hybridization, and Reality Shift are all permanent forms of creature removal that we've seen be printed by Wizards. So these examples show that in 2024, the color pie in Magic is less of a hard rule and more of a guideline, which brings me to my second argument. What do the vast majority of these cards have in common? There is a downside added to the cards to justify straying outside of the color pie. Red can hit an enchantment with Chaos Warp with the risk of putting a bigger threat onto the field. Feed the Swarm allows black to hit enchantments at the cost of losing life. Blue can permanently remove creatures at the cost of giving your opponent vanilla creatures instead. We can conclude that Wizards deems it acceptable to break the color pie as long as you give the card a flavorful downside to justify allowing the color access to a tool that it normally wouldn't have access to. So let's recap what's been established before we move on to design ideas for stack interaction outside of blue. First, at the highest power tables, stack interaction is the most important defensive tool to not lose the game. Second, locking stack interaction behind one color leads to less diverse games and a narrower meta, which one could argue leads to worse overall gameplay experiences. Number 3, Wizards has thrown from past card designs that it is acceptable to break the color pie as long as the card effect is suboptimal or a flavorful downside is added. So with that in mind, here are some card designs that I would propose that are informed by these principles. I'll touch on these briefly because these are not the focus of the video, but I think are just good examples to show what I would like to see designed in the future. So our white option here, for 3 mana, we can counter a target spell unless its controller pays 1 for each creature you control with power 2 or less, which means that the spell cares about the number of weenies that you have on the battlefield, which is very core to white. And I think it is important to have at least a double colored pip within this particular spell, and most of the spells that we'll see in just a second here, so that these cannot easily be splashed. A potential design in black would be 3 mana for an instant that says, as an additional cost to cast a spell, exile a black creature you control and a black card from your hand to counter target spell. And I think this fits within the color pie because it forces a downside where the black player has to give up an alternative resource, which is very flavorful within the black part of the color pie, and also avoids the potential upside that would be created from triggering synergies such as sacrifice effects and discard effects if the cards were discarded or sacrificed instead of being exiled. Our red option is 3 mana for an instant, choose a creature controlled by the owner of target spell, counter the targeted spell, flip a coin until you win the flip. For each flip you lost, the controller of the chosen creature creates that many copies of it. So with red, we've seen chaotic effects where the spells can blow up in the caster's face, and this is much in line with that thinking where your opponent might be able to get multiple copies of effectively the worst creature on their board if this spell comes up with bad flips. So another option here for red that introduces a little bit of chaos while avoiding the effect that we already have in the form of Tybalt's Trickery. And for green, we are playing off the big creature archetype within green. So this will be a 6 mana instant with Ferocious. This spell costs 2 less to cast if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. Counter target non-creature spell. So the ceiling is a 4 mana counter target non-creature spell, which once again, we're breaking the color pie, but we're still obeying the flavor of green by both requiring a creature with power 4 or greater for this to be remotely playable, and also avoiding the ability to remove creatures off of the stack. So in conclusion, more card designs that interact with the stack need to be printed for colors outside of blue to introduce variability into the meta of high power commander, which leads to more fun and diverse gameplay experiences. At high power tables, stack interaction has shown to be the most powerful defensive tool that a deck can have because the majority of wins are deployed through the stack and will win the game if not stopped on the stack. Wizards of the Coast has already shown a tendency to stray from the color pie as long as the card designs are suboptimal or contain a flavorful downside. And if we embody that same design philosophy, we can make high power games of Magic more fun by breaking the monopoly that blue has on stack interaction. So that's the video, guys. Let me know what you think about this down in the comments below. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to stay tuned for more Magic content from me, and hopefully we will see you all in the next one.